With the federal government shutdown now well into its third week, it's as good a time as any to ask ourselves why. Why is the majority of our government even shut down? So tomorrow night, the president plans to talk about it in prime time. He has been saying, telling Chuck Schumer, for example, and Nancy Pelosi, or anybody else who will listen, that it's all about the border with Mexico being extremely unsafe. So much so, it's a state of emergency, says the president. No one doubts the importance of security for our country, both at seaports and airports, our borders, north, south, our territorial waters. But the president seems to be saying that none of that is as important as the border with Mexico, interestingly enough. It's making a lot of journalists ask questions like those posed yesterday by Chris Wallace. Did you see this? So Chris Wallace is sitting there talking to Sarah Sanders yesterday, the spokesperson for Mr. Trump. And this gets really interesting when he starts pressing her. Take a listen.
We know that roughly nearly 4,000 known or suspected terrorists come into our country illegally. And we know that our most vulnerable point of entry is at our southern border.
I know this statistic. I didn't know if you were going to use it, but I studied up on this. Do you know where those 4,000 people come, or where they're captured? Airports.
Not always, but certainly a large number.
The State Department says there hasn't been any terrorists that they found coming across the southern border from Mexico. It's by air, it's by land, and it's by sea. It's all of the above. But one thing that you're forgetting is that the most vulnerable point of entry that we have into this country is our southern border, and we have to protect it.
So Chris Wallace's interview with Sarah Sanders did seem to show, pardon me, that the southern border may not be as dangerous as the president says it is. But still, you know, we wanted to be responsible about this. We wanted to make sure we fact-checked as much as we possibly could. So we've asked Michele Greenstein, as usual, to look into this and see what the facts really are. So, all right. She says 4,000 suspected terrorists. Where's she getting that information from, and what does she really mean?
Yeah, so I got to say Chris Wallace is absolutely right. The data she's referring to comes from a DHS report from last year where 3,755 people were stopped because their names matched those on a watch list. But those people, like he says, were apprehended at the airport. They were not apprehended at the southern border. And the irony, of course, is that because of this government shutdown, a lot of TSA officers are calling out from work because they expect to work without being paid. So if all of that apprehension is happening at the airport, then the shutdown is actually making the country less safe, wouldn't you say?
Wow. Irony of ironies.
Right.
So, all right. Judging, because you went fast there for us, and I'm a little slow.
Surely.
So what you just said...
I'll break it down. There's no evidence whatsoever to suggest that people coming across the southern border are on the terrorist watch list or wanted by intelligence agencies.
In fact, the most dangerous place in America, if you go by stats, is our airports. That's where would-be terrorists or suspected terrorists come and try to get in through and are usually thwarted.
Exactly. And let me show you one graph. Let's look at apprehensions across the southern border. Wow. As you can see, in the fiscal year of 2017, Border Patrol made 130,000 apprehensions of Mexicans. In 2000, that number was 1.6 million. So it's going down. I mean, the last time it was this low was literally the 70s. Let me show you one other thing. Let's look at the number of Mexican immigrants living in the U.S. without documentation. That, too, has been declining by more than 1 million in just the last 10 years. That means more Mexican immigrants are leaving the U.S. More Mexican immigrants without documentation are leaving the U.S. than entering. And that includes both immigrants who entered the U.S. illegally and those who have just overstayed their visas.
I also had read, and you can check me on this, that the only actual terrorists who were caught crossing the border, I mean apprehended in the moment, was not in the Mexico border, but the Canadian border.
Well, that may be true. That if so, it wasn't this year. This year, the number of suspected terrorists caught at the border is literally zero.
Both borders?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
that was back in 2005 or 2006.
Right, and I think the main reason that these claims by the Trump administration kind of go unchecked by large segments of the Trump administration supporters is because people are seeing, you know, their jobs being sent away. People are seeing drug overdoses and things like that. So when they get told it's because of Mexican immigrants, that really starts to resonate, despite the fact that unauthorized immigrants in the U.S. workforce has been declining in the past 10 years. But I got to say, this, we know, is not about national security. It's not about keeping our borders safe, keeping Americans safe, things like that.
Politics.
But who is the shutdown really affecting? It's not making us safer. It's affecting workers. And I got to say, like, both the White House and Democratic leadership seem to be totally indifferent to what it's doing to
They're still getting
contractors
paid. They're
and
still getting
workers.
paid. Yeah.
Exactly. But meanwhile, thousands are receiving short paychecks. 800,000 are set to receive no pay at all. It's life or death for government contractors who are likely not going to be repaid when the shutdown is over. So, I mean, what does Trump have to say about all this? Let's take a look.
What is a safety net for federal workers? You're saying months and possibly a year for this shutdown. Do you have in mind a safety net for those who need their checks, those who need SSI, those who need Medicaid, what have you?
Well, the safety net is going to be having a strong border because we're going to be safe.
It's a good answer. Thank you, Michele Greenstein, for that report. We appreciate it. All right.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.